might have heard of in the UK. And then I came back to the UK and I have my family. I've got 4 slightly growing children now. My eldest is 16 and my youngest is 10. And they are just a treat. So I do lots of family cooking. I love entertaining, so lots of entertaining cooking as well. And we're at home in my kitchen in Suffolk today, which is a total treat. So we are right on the eastern side we're the most easterly point in the UK. And if you, all that's between us and heading east is Seals and sea, and then eventually Holland. So that's where we are in the UK. And in my AGA kitchen today, this is my home kitchen, so it's hopefully as clean as we can possibly make it, but we do all our DEMs live streamed now from our home kitchens. I've got kitchens I use as well that have an ER7, that have an R7, and we're shortly about to put an R3 into the other side of this kitchen here as well. So this is my ER3 160 I'm going to be cooking on today. Let's just talk about AGAs for a minute. What would be brilliant, so please do use this as your chance to kind of answer any question, to get any information. You can use the chat function to put comments in and questions in, and Simone and Marissa will answer those for you, and they'll shout some of them out to me if it's things that are useful for everyone to know or that we want to elaborate a bit more on. So do please make it interactive as much as you can. It would be amazingly helpful if you want to pop in the chat which AGA you have or are thinking of getting, or where you are in your AGA world, what we can help you with most today. I'm just going to cook a nice selection of recipes, hopefully, of interesting, useful AGA techniques, nice, simple, tasty flavors, and we're just going to cook our way around the AGA. I'll talk about my AGA, my model I have, and the differences it has between other AGAs that you may have, so that nobody's confused about which oven I'm putting something in. There might be a point where you think I've put it in the wrong oven, which I might well have done actually. So do please pop a question in the chat, or unmute actually if you just want to shout out, and let me make sure that everything is clear. So the guys I think will have sent out an email recipe pack. There's bound to be the odd typo in it because that's kind of how life is, so my apologies, but we're just going to work our way through this. Let's talk about AGAs to start with. So AGAs are made of cast iron, and that's why they cook the way they do, because cast iron uses radiant heat to cook food differently. It's like the warmth of the sunshine through the window. It's that really deep, penetrating, gentle heat. So that's how we get crispy roast potatoes on the outside, but beautifully tender and fluffy on the inside. That's how we get juicy joints. That's how we get beautiful moist baking. That's why AGAs cook the way they are. So the cast iron bit is really important. AGAs also have, and for all, they've been around for nearly 100 years, they have what's called dedicated cooking zones at preset temperatures. And that means there's a place to do everything rather than just selecting a temperature and always putting it in the same place. And that means we use the whole of the AGA to cook with, because every single part of it has a function. So you have a roasting oven for fast, hot cooking. You have a baking oven. So your roasting oven sits at about 220. It's a really hot cooking area. You have a baking oven. That's for more moderate cooking, actually. It's about 190. You have a simmering oven. That's about 120. You have a warming oven. That's about 90 or 100 degrees. Then on the tops, you have a boiling plate for boiling things. You have a simmering plate for more gentle cooking. And you have a warming plate, depending on your model. So all AGAs have most of those, if not all of those features. And this one is no different. So let me tell you about my cooker today. So this is an ER3 160. It's 3 cookers in one, actually. So the central section here is an AGA 60. It has a 2-temperature top plate. It has a 2-temperature oven, and it has a separately controllable simmering oven. So it's got a hot oven and a cooler oven. And that's your AGA 60, completely cast iron. The next bit, if you go a bit bigger, this is an ER3 100, this section. So in addition to the cast iron section in the middle, it has a warming oven, it has a storage cupboard, which we'll come on to in detail in a minute, and it has a 2-zone state-of-the-art induction hob on the top. So it has a bit of a blend of modern technology as well as traditional AGA cooking. But even within this 1 meter wide space, it has all of the functionality of a traditional 4-oven AGA. It's got roasting, baking, simmering, warming. It's got boiling plate, simmering plate. And in addition, it's got the 2-zone induction hob and this useful storage area. If you go the next step up and go bigger, you have an ER3 160. So we add this tall fan oven section with a separate simmering plate on the top and a tall fan oven. It's a 90-litre fan oven. It's a really beautiful cooker to cook with. It's separately controllable. It has a dial with temperature range on it. It heats up in about 10 or 15 minutes. And that's very useful if you want an alternative cooking when the weather is completely hot, if you want extra cooking capacity, or if you want precise temperature control if you're baking to a particular recipe. So what's different about this AGA? Well, it's electric for a start, and I'm reliably informed that one of my solar panels provides enough heat, enough electricity to run my AGA ER3. It's a slightly different size. It's not so deep as a traditional AGA. It's 600 millimeters deep, which means it fits into conventional kitchen units more easily, and it's available in 7 different widths in total by the time you've got the AGA 60, the 90, the 100 and the 110, and then the 150, 160 and 170 if you add the separate zone on the side. So that's really, so the other thing that's special about this cooker is its fast heat up. So it's designed for modern living where you can have it on when you want, but it's easy to turn it off again. It heats up very quickly. The tops take 5 minutes to heat up to simmering and 10 minutes to boiling temperature maximum. And then the ovens are hot within an hour. The top oven is timer controlled if you want to, actually, it makes it really convenient if you're out of work all day and you come back in at the end of the day. So that's my AGA. That's the AGA I'm cooking on today. So I'll tell you the names of the areas I cook in as I use them. But please do shout out if you're not totally clear about which, where I've put it. I can see when there are little comments pop up in the chat, but I'm too far away to read them. So if Marissa or Simone want to shout out questions, that's totally fine. Please make sure we help you as much as possible. Good, right, well, let's cook. So the menu today, on our little culinary tour of the AGA, we're going to do a quick AGA breakfast because we always like to show you that because it's important that you know the range of uses you can use the top for. We're going to make a winter vegetable tart. I'm going to do as a sort of a main sort of meal for family or friends or just for every day, a slow roast spatchcocked chicken, a creamy Parmesan risotto and some charred broccoli. Then we always like to do a bread to go with it because AGAs are so brilliant at bread. So we'll do a focaccia with cherry tomatoes today. Because I thought you might need something warming and comforting after all everyone's been through, I've got a steamed marmalade pudding, and then there's a lighter dessert option, some mini meringue pavlovas with mascarpone cream. That is today's menu. We'll just work our way through it. I'll probably forget something, burn something, lose something, so just bear with me, but please just sit back and enjoy the cooking. So let's start with the tops. So the AGA, let's just move this for a second, there we go. So the simmering plate, now I'll just turn, there we go. Hopefully we can see quite nicely. So use the, you guys will all know who've had your AGAs for a while and lived with them for ages. Use the boiling plate for boiling the kettle. Mine is on simmering setting at the moment. So the most convenient thing for me to do on my ER3 is just use the induction hob to boil the kettle. Use the P function, which is power boost. It comes to the boil super quick. So that's the best place to make my cup of tea when I need it. The simmering plate we use for making a really quick, easy AGA breakfast, actually. So I have here an English muffin. We'll try and do lots of English cooking today. No, we won't. We'll do a kind of a bit of a blend. So you can use the AGA for toasting. I like to line the simmering plate with a piece of baking lid because it keeps it nice and clean. And if things are runny or sticky, then they're easy to take off. So I've got, but you can toast both on, you can use the AGA toaster to toast when you're on boiling setting, if just a really plain piece of toast or sourdough or something. But if I'm toasting hot cross buns, brioche buns, something a bit more sugary, I would use, I would line it with a piece of baking lid and do it on the cooler simmering plate setting. So I'll start toasting my muffin. I'm going to add a piece of bacon. So you can use your top plate as a griddle. So on simmering setting, it is your built-in griddle, and it's a beautiful place to cook. Pop the lid down. I'll say goodbye to that for a moment. Let's talk about the induction hob on this cooker for a second. So those of you who have an ER3 or thinking about an ER3, the induction hob is very much a blend, we use it very much in conjunction with the AGA tops, with the boiling and the simmering settings. You've got P for power boost, which is for boiling your kettle, bring your pan to the boil really quickly. You've got low temperature functions, which are really, really useful. Press the left-hand button on on one of the two ranges, press it once for one wavy line, press it twice for two wavy lines, and press it 3 times for 3 wavy lines. And what that gives you, the lowest setting gives you about 40 degrees, which is perfect for a melting chocolate, something really delicate like that. 2 wavy lines is 70 degrees. It's perfect for a béarnaise sauce, a hollandaise sauce, those tricky emulsified sauces, a crème anglaise, something like that. And then the third wavy line gives you just 94 degrees, it's just below simmering. And we use that for just defrosting a pan of soup, just gently bringing something to a simmer, just starting to heat a pan of anything, just nice and slowly, so it's not going to boil over. On the temperature, the induction hob gives you a slightly wider temperature range to the AGA top. It's cooler at the bottom end. The simmering plate setting equivalent is about 4 on the induction, and the boiling setting equivalent is about 7. So if you cook up to 8 or 9, you're cooking slightly hotter, and that's good for a ragingly hot stir fry or a steak or something. The AGA tops still do things brilliantly well, but the induction just gives you a little bit wider range. So that's that. Now let's turn our bacon over. The muffin will be starting to toast. There we go. Move that to the side. Now, those of you, I'm sure, I'm totally hopeful that you've all seen an AGA egg before, but if you haven't, this is how we do them. So crack an egg on somewhere on the little dish and just simply break it onto the bacon lid, put the lid down and leave that to it for not very long, actually, just for a moment or two. It's fat-free, it's healthy, it's quick, it's easy. You know, it's the easiest way to have a really good start for your day. A couple of eggs, nice bit of protein. And if you want to go with it, some bacon or some avocado or anything, or make it a bit more special for the weekend with a nice hollandaise sauce into Eggs Benedict. So that's my egg. I'm also just going to start on my other simmering plate. So on the bigger version of this cooker, on the 150, 160, 170, you get a simmering plate, a second simmering plate here, so you can have 2 lots of simmering if you want. So this is a great cooker if you want to, if you cook for a lot of people, if you wanted to have an enormous bonfire night party or a chilly night or something, and you've got 2 nice casseroles simmering on the top. Because the tops are heated separately, you can cook to your heart's content on the top without ever wondering about whether the ovens are going to lose any heat. The modern AGAs don't do that anymore because of the way they're constructed. I just need to find another piece of bacon lid. Now you can't quite see this. I'm just going to toast a few almonds on my second simmering plate. There we go. And we'll see them again in a minute. But you can use the simmering plate like this for toasting almonds, for toasting nuts, for seeds, all that sort of thing. Right, there's my egg. Now my storage cupboard. So the right-hand side of this AGA is controlled with a little green button here. And the storage cupboard doesn't have any heating of its own, but it does have the ability to keep things warm, because when any of the rest of the cooker is on, it will become slightly warm itself. So let's just take our AGA egg off. Here's a really good tip, okay? If you ever find that your egg sticks on your bacon lid, lift it off the heat, because the change of temperature will release it slightly. Somebody's borrowed my best spatula from my kitchen, so we'll just try and do it with this one. There we go. So there we go. Now my egg is actually nice and runny still in the middle, but we don't really need breakfast now. And if anyone that lives with teenagers know that the chances of them appearing before about midday is not very big. So I'm going to put this into the warming oven, and it's going to stay warm while we cook the rest of the food today. So the warming oven down here is, we use it for keeping food warm for up to a couple of hours, really, until we're ready to eat. But today my breakfast is going to be in there for maybe just a few minutes, maybe about half an hour. Put the lid down. The bacon lid, if you don't have bacon lid already, it's like a silicone coated paper, and we use it for, it's really non-stick, makes roasting tins much easier to keep clean, and it just goes in the dishwasher or the sink to wash. So that's good. My storage cupboard I've used keeping my plates warm, but also for other things we'll see shortly. Good, so that's a speedy breakfast and other things to use that for. Let's move on and make our winter vegetable tart. Good, right. So pastry and the AGA just go totally hand in hand. Actually, we use the roasting oven really for cooking most of our hot pastry dishes, and this is a really easy dish to assemble. I'll show you the assembly only because it's so easy. So some of you guys might like to make your own pastry, and that's totally brilliant. But today I have just bought some ready rolled pastry. I'm using a half-size AGA Port Meringue. What am I using today? I'm using a Spode by AGA half-size baking dish, and these go from the freezer to the oven to the table. They've got a really hard-wearing finish, so you can cut them with a sharp knife and not worry about scratching the finish, which means you can serve things straight from the dish. Similarly, you can make the whole tart and freeze it, which is lovely. So take the pastry. I've taken this out of the fridge, so it's not exactly room temperature, but it's slightly more malleable. And just press it into the tray. There we go. You could butter the tray a little bit if you wanted to with puff pastry. That might be a good idea. Short crust pastry hardly ever sticks, but sometimes puff does. Then just trim off the edges. Use those to make cheese straws. That's what we'll do. So I'll just pop those little pile into the fridge, and later on I'll just sort of roll it out, sprinkle it with whatever leftover grated cheese I can find in the fridge, and bake them in the roasting oven for maybe like 10 or 15 minutes. Brush them with a little milk or beaten egg to make them shiny. So just trim off the edges. In an ideal world, you would put this into the fridge for a few minutes to just firm up, but we'll just bake it straight away like this. Prick it to get rid of any little bubbles. If you get a little bubble on the pastry, what will happen is you'll get a little hump when you bake it. It'll go down again actually, but if I'm doing a good job today, we won't have bubbles, but we might well do. I think the thing I love about the AGA cooking is that you don't have to be a brilliant cook. You just have to, you know, put together some simple ingredients, put it in the right place in the cooker, and off you go. So that could go into the fridge for a moment or two if we wanted to. So my filling is, so the base for this filling is a tub of ricotta, and you can make your own ricotta actually. It's got a reasonable shelf life on it, so if you buy it when you see it, but you can make it actually, it's not that difficult. And just mix that with a fork. Then add 3 eggs. There we go. Mix that together. I like recipes that you can just remember. You don't have to think, you know, they're techniques. So you just think, oh, what should we have for supper tonight? I know if I pick up a packet of pastry and some ricotta, and I've got 3 eggs at home, and just let's look and see what vegetables I've got in the fridge and some cheese, then that's your tart. So that's the base for my filling. Season it with some salt, definitely. Where's my salt gone? Here we go. There we go. Season it with some salt. That is really important, actually. Otherwise, your tart really won't taste that tasty. So if in doubt, slightly more. And my children laugh at me because I always say, don't be scared of the salt. So that's the filling. Let's pour that over the pastry. Spread it out. You don't need lots of this actually, you know, because it's mainly vegetables. All we're doing is just giving. If you want to do this as a kind of vegan type dish or more of a plant-based dish, then use like a tomato puree or a tomato sauce, or like, you know, some pasta sauce or something. Even ready-made pasta sauce works well as a base. And use like a phyllo pastry, use a couple of layers of that because that's often gluten-free, but vegan. But often the pastries, most of the ready-made pastries are anyway, actually. So that's the base. Then we want some vegetables. So vegetables today, I've got some roasted squash. And I love this actually. So all I did was cut it in half. I left the seeds in and I've left the skin on. So I'm going to scoop the seeds out now, because to be honest, they come out much more easily when they're cooked than trying to scoop out the seeds when you're when it's not cooked. And similarly, it's much easier to peel off the skin if you wanted to when it's cooked than when it's raw. I love the skin, and this is what I love about our cooking. So it's so moist and juicy and sweet and delicious. But I wanted the skin like this. So I cooked this in the roasting oven for about 45 minutes or so. And it's quite coloured. The skin is like skin on a jacket potato. You can eat the skin. So we're just going to slice this up. And actually, these little charred bits are lovely because that's what gives you the flavour. That's where your kind of umami flavour comes from that we talk about. And that's why barbecue food is delicious, because you get the slight bitterness and aromatic flavour and taste from the colouring on it. If you wanted to cook your roasted squash, but you didn't want to colour the skin like that, cook it on a baking setting, on a moderate setting, so in the baking oven, or turn down to baking setting, for about the same time, and it'll cook exactly the same, but it won't colour so much. And the same goes for peppers, actually. So that's my squash. We'll probably use half of it today. That might be enough. It's quite rich squash and it's quite filling. And my second vegetable today is I've got some kale. So on the recipe, it just says a couple of handfuls of kale, and that's my cooking's a bit like that, I'm afraid. It's a little bit haphazard. So it's literally a couple of handfuls of kale, or greens, or bits of broccoli, or leeks. And they don't need pre-cooking. You know, even broccoli doesn't need cooking. Leeks don't need pre-cooking. And in the summer, you know, use some of the lovely spring summer vegetables, asparagus, courgettes, all those sorts of things. So some green bits, and then my squash on the top. What's the filling is going to bubble up. We don't need to mix it all together. The filling is going to bubble up through the vegetables. So there we go. And that looks pretty and colourful and just what we're after. So finally, some cheese. I always like to put some cheese on the top because it gives you a little bit of saltiness, something that you love, or just whatever's in the fridge, to be honest, just grate a few bits. This is some truffled cheddar that my sister-in-law gave me. It was my birthday recently. She sent me a Fortnum and Mason's hamper, and this is the end of the truffled cheddar from the hamper. So it can just be anything, really. But some of the nice, some like Parmesan is nice as well if you want something that's just a little bit lighter, or pecorino, those sorts of things. A grinding of black pepper, I think, on here. And if you've forgotten to put the salt in, then put some more on the top. And that's it. So that's ready for the oven. So we're going to bake that in the roasting oven directly on the floor. So in the Argas, you don't have to blind bake the pastry. I haven't cooked the pastry first, it's completely raw. And in the ER3, or the fast heat up Argas, you use the floor grid that comes with it to cook on the floor with. It just lifts the food a little bit off the bottom of the floor. And because you've got electrical elements embedded in the cast iron, that's how it heats up the cast iron. It's important to keep the food away from it slightly if you're cooking for a prolonged period. So pop that onto the floor, pop it in. Those dishes fit on the runners as well, actually. And I'm going to cook it for, okay, we're going to give it, I think it's going to need 22 minutes, somewhere between 20 and 25. I'm going to look at it after 2/3 of the cooking time. So after about 15 minutes, we'll have a peek, because we might need to turn it around. You can always open the doors to have a peek with your Aga, because the heat is coming from the cast iron like radiant heat. It's not all going to suddenly blow out if you leave the door open. So that is my tart. Move these out of the way. The rest of that squash might become, you know, that could become some soup really easily. It could store in the fridge for a couple of days. It could become a little salad with some greens and maybe some goat's cheese. It could become a little dip. You could mix it into hummus. That would be really nice. It's got a nice rich flavor to it. Right. So what's next? And that's a nice lunch, you know, quiche, you know, piece of tart with some soup, or with a salad, or with a piece of bread, or just kind of in passing, or in the car for lunch, or as part of a picnic, or a kind of in-between meal, then it's perfect too. Good. Okay, let's do our main dish now. So the main our main supper, and this is quite a nice convertible one. So the risotto we're going to do to start with, we'll get that going, is lovely for just a really simple supper. Then you can make it a bit more substantial with some vegetables, and then you can make it more presentable, or more of a family meal, or more of a meal for friends with a little roast chicken. So these three will hopefully show you some nice useful AGA techniques. Let's start with the risotto. So the first thing we're going to do is soften an onion on the simmering plate. So in here, I've got 1 onion, I've got a tablespoon of olive oil or 2, and I've got some butter. I've got one of the lovely AGA cast iron pans. That's why cast iron pans work so well, because they cook in the same way as an AGA does. So, you know, they're like, it's kind of belt and braces using both. So we'll just pop that on the simmering plate. That will simmer away and soften for a few minutes. We'll take off my toasted almonds, have done a lovely toasting job. I'm going to set those aside into a little bowl. What's very useful is that you can just pick up the Bacode light and tip in there. So we use it. We toast a lot of pine nuts and things this way as well. There we go. So with risotto, let's talk about risotto and talk about rice and things, because your AGA is your ultimate rice cooker. So risotto is it's short grain rice, and the grains are coated in lots of lovely starch. And when you stir it, so traditional risotto, you stand next to the cooker for 20 minutes, getting hot, stirring, and gradually adding your stock and wishing you could kind of take the weight off your feet and sit down. So this is a much easier way to do risotto. And we're going to achieve the same amount of stirring as we do slowly for 20 minutes, but we're going to do a little bit of stirring at the beginning. We're going to put it in the simmering oven, and then we're going to give it a bit of stirring at the end. So it doesn't matter when you do the stirring as long as you do it. So as long as we release all that nice starch to give us the nice smooth creamy sauce that goes with it. So the first step is to soften the onion, and then we'll add the rice and the stock shortly. So while that's cooking, let's do some vegetables, talk about vegetables. So let's do some broccoli. So I'm going to char this today. So I've got an induction griddle. I'll show you this actually, because it's a really good piece of kit. So there's lots of AGA griddles actually. This one goes on the induction hob as well as it goes in the oven. And we use it for steaks. We use it for salmon. It's delicious. It's hard anodized. No, I don't think what it is. It's cast aluminium, so it's got a really good non-stick coating. That's my favorite. And I haven't oiled it in any way, actually. Don't put oil onto the griddle. It just runs into the gaps and it doesn't go anywhere near the food. Always oil the food slightly. This broccoli, I put a teaspoon of olive oil onto my hands and I just toss the broccoli with it. So it's got a little bit on it, but hardly anything. It doesn't even really need it. So just put that. My griddle has been preheating for a few minutes. I've bridged the two zones together. So you press the two scales anywhere at the same time, and then you use the left hand scale to select the temperature you want for your bridged function. So whether you've got a 2-zone or a 3-zone induction hob, you can bridge those two zones together, and you can use a lot of, or even a big pan in the middle. It's really handy. I wonder if you can see, hopefully you can see on here, it's quite good. So we'll leave that broccoli on there. We'll give it maybe 5 or 10 minutes. I want nice charredness. It'll be tender on the inside and slightly charred on the outside, so it got a lovely flavor. You could toss it with a bit of chili if you want to do, certainly plenty of salt, maybe a squeeze of lemon juice. So that's broccoli. With vegetables in general, so green vegetables and vegetables that grow above the ground, we cook on the tops of the AGA, because you generally cook them for 5 or maybe 10 minutes. Whatever kind of AGA you have, that's the place to cook your green vegetables. If your AGA is on all the time, if the tops are always on as well as the ovens, what you want to bear in mind is if you cook on the tops for a long time and you put a big pan of cold water on the top, eventually it will pull the heat out of the tops, and eventually the ovens have to sacrifice a little bit of their heat to replenish the heat on the tops, because you've got one heat source that's heating the whole cooker. So with the modern AGAs that we have now that have the on-off top plates, they're separately controlled, so the tops can do what they like without the ovens having to worry about doing anything. And on the fast heat up AGAs, the ovens have the electrical elements embedded in the cast iron to take the heat to where it needs quickly to heat up the whole of the cast iron, a bit like using ibuprofen gel rather than just taking a pill. It's working in the same way, but it's taking exactly to where it's needed. So green vegetables, cook them on the top, drain them, and I like to actually just often keep my vegetables warm in the warming oven down where our breakfast is. Don't put a lid on the pan, it'll make them go sludge coloured. Leave the pan open, just drain the vegetables from the back of the pan or a serving dish, put them in the warming oven, they'll stay there quite happily for half an hour or so until you're ready to eat. Now, root vegetables are different. Actually, I'm sure you'll know, so things like new potatoes or celeriac, parsnips, turnips, all those sorts of things, Swedes, bring them to the boil on the top, let them simmer for 5 or 10 minutes, and then drain off most of the water, put the lid on the pan and put them into your simmering oven where they'll steam. So new potatoes or normal potatoes, I give them 10 minutes to simmer and then 20 minutes to cook. Carrots, I would give them 5 minutes to simmer on the top and 15 minutes to steam. And again, once they're cooked, you can put them into a serving dish or leave them in the pan, put them in your warming oven, and then they're ready for whenever you are. The AGA pans all stack, which means you can get lots and lots of different pans into your ovens without having to worry about decanting them into separate dishes. So that's vegetables, right? That's charring. Let's see how our onion is doing. So we can turn this up to boiling setting, because in a minute we're going to add our stock. So on the ER3 and the AGA 60, you've got these really simple control dials. So you can select simmering temperature or boiling temperature. It takes about 5 minutes from completely cold to heat to simmering and about 5 minutes to heat up to boiling. So it's really quick. Often if the rest of the AGA is on in any way, it'll be slightly warm to start with, so it'll heat much quicker than that. The ovens similarly have their dials as well that let you select one oven or both ovens or neither. So that's my onion softening. Let's talk about chicken. We'll do our chicken while our oven softens, and then we'll get our risotto into the oven too. So I'm going to do a slow roasted. I didn't really know what kind of roast to do for you today. Actually, I had lots of good ideas, and I really fancied some lamb. But in the end, I think there's such an abundance of lemons, and it's a good lemon time of year. Chicken is lovely friends with lemons, so we've got a simple roast chicken to show you. But it's going to have a slightly different treatment. Where's its dish? Oh, I can smell my broccoli. Lovely. I'll just turn that over. So you hopefully can see, and I can smell this, it's got that lovely deliciousness. Let me show you, see if I can show you the camera. So it's got that slight chard on the side of it. This is tender stem, so it'll cook slightly quicker than normal broccoli would do. There we go. That'll be ready very shortly. So let's do my chicken. I need to find my dish. So take a nice roasting dish. I've got the AGA Portmeirion roasting, pouring lip roaster, it's called actually. It fits in the Ardens, it fits on the runners. It goes, if you want, from freezer to oven to table. We use it for all sorts of things like lasagnas or monster crumbles or things like that, as well as for roasting. The pouring lip is very handy. You can use it on the simmering plate to make gravy. So take a chicken. We're going to make it super quick to roast. So here's my little chicken, okay, and I've got a pair of scissors or poultry shears. We're going to spatchcock it. So I'm just going to cut down one side of the backbone. There's quite a lot of crunching involved in this, but Zoom is quite clever at not screening out. Like if we use if I use Thermomix to blitz something when I'm cooking, it screens out that noise quite cleverly. There we go. So just all the way down, and then you have to just have a bit of a moment. So then you need to open it out, but squash it down. There we go, and it will go kind of flat. There we go, and that will take its cooking time from 45 minutes to about half an hour almost, actually, if you want to. Pop it into a roasting dish. There we go, get rid of that one. Give my hands a little wash. And then we want a little coating for it. I'm a bit reluctant to use the word marinade because marinade involves time. And actually, I don't really want to be marinating something if I want it on the table in half an hour. So this is a flavour coating. So take a little bit of olive oil, not that much actually, just a little bit for this, a little bit of olive oil. And I've got a clove of garlic. And then you want the zest of a lemon and some herbs. It's really simple. The thing is, because your AGA is going to cook your chicken and make it so tasty and delicious, you really only need a few flavors to bring out the flavor of the chicken. You're not trying to really overpower it with too much flavor only. And there's a lot of that going on in cooking at the moment. There's a lot of flavor for flavor's sake. And sometimes I think it's easy to forget about your main ingredient and letting the flavor really sing. Okay, so zest of my lemon. And that smells delicious before we've even done anything else. Cut the lemon in half, put half the juice into the little dish. Don't worry about the odd pip. Life is too short. Keep the other half, just put it into the roasting dish. Come back to that in a minute. Then with this, we want some herbs. I've got some thyme here, actually. And if you've got a little wintry corner of your garden that might have some parsley, bit of rosemary, actually. With the thyme, you know, it's quite, you want the, if we were in a restaurant, we'd be taking all the leaves off the stalks, but life is definitely too short for that. And these stalks are quite thin. If you've got very woody thyme, then I would peel, just shake the stalks a bit and let the leaves come off. But here I've just chopped in the herbs. If you've got some parsley, that's nice too. Some salt and pepper at this point. And you know, anything else you sort of fancy in the way of flavors, chicken and lemon is a really, really good combination. They are great friends. So that's really what's going on here and not too much else. So take the chicken. You can make the odd slit in the flesh if you wanted to, not necessarily compulsory, but if you felt the need, you could do. Don't forget the thighs, because there's loads of delicious meat. The brown meat on the thighs and the legs has got more B vitamins than the rest of it. So make sure, for the sake of everybody's health, that you give them a bit of everything. There we go. So just take, there's not that much oil, because we're going to get quite a lot of juices out of the chicken the way we're going to cook this. So, and if you put lots of oil, it's just going to sort of smatter around the dish. So we don't need much. There we go. You could do the same. You could do this with lamb. You could do this any sort of roast you wanted to, actually. Would be yummy. Okay. Let's put that in the oven. These out of the way. So roasting in the AGA, you've got lots of places to roast in the AGA. So you can fast roast in the roasting oven. It's about 220. It's really, really hot. You can moderate roast, which is where if you bought a ready to roast joint and you had a look at the packet instructions, it would say roast at 190, and that's your baking setting. So on this AGA, that would be a question of turning down your oven to your moderate setting, which is the one with the half silver symbol. That's the early warning for the tart. We'll have a look at it in a minute. So fast roast, you can fast roast a whole chicken in 45 minutes or so, a little one, and this would probably take slightly less than that now that it's been spatchcocked. You can medium roast it in the baking oven, which I said, and we cook turkeys often for Christmas in the UK when we do our amazing Christmases. You have a slightly different menu for your Christmases, but we have turkey here, and we cook that in baking setting. Is a better place to cook it. But you can slow roast as well. And what we do with slow roasting is you start off in the top, which is what we're going to do with this. There we go. And we'll give it maybe half an hour. Cook it in the top oven and the hot oven until it's coloured, until it looks like it's cooked, but it won't be inside. And then we put it in the simmering oven for an hour. It will be twice as much cooking time as would be left if you were calculating it precisely. But for an hour, a couple of hours, kind of as long as you fancy, really, actually, until you're ready, because it will cook slowly and it's very difficult to overcook things in the simmering oven. So that's my chicken in there. Let's have a quick peek. I can hear my onions bubbling really ferociously. There we go. And they're on boiling settings, so they're probably slightly hotter than we needed. But you know what to do with your top plate to graduate the heat? You just pull it off the heat slightly onto the resting areas, and that gives you a reduced heat. So let's quickly look at the tart and turn that around if it needs it, and then we'll put the rice into the risotto and we'll get that going as well. So the tart looks okay. It's puffing up nicely. There's no little corner looks any more cooked than the other. Pop it back in. Chicken's in there to start cooking, that's fine as well. Good. So let's put the rice into the risotto. So for your quantities don't have to be that precise. We'll do a cup of rice. This is risotto rice, so it's arborio rice or camaroli rice or paella rice, it might be called. I wonder if I can get, hopefully you can see, there's something it's not liking about the light on my camera today. Stir the rice in the warm butter and oil. And that will start to get the starch grains on the outside of the rice to release. And that's part of what we want. Great. Then add some stock. So we're going to add most of our stock, but not all of it. So I've got a jug of stock that's just been staying nice and warm on the resting area. If your tops of your AGA are warm are off and you want somewhere warm for things to cook, to stay warm or stay cozy, you can use your warming oven or the storage cupboard. So add twice the amount of stock to rice. And then we want a bit back because we want a bit more of it later. Because when this is going to go in the oven now for 20 minutes, it's going to look really unpromising when it comes out. And you'll be like, oh gosh, it just looks like rice, how dull. But then a bit more magic will happen, which is what the rest of the stock is for. Give that a stir for a minute as it comes to the boil. Because again, this is part of our 20 minutes of stirring equivalent. Do you know, it's really hot in the kitchen here today, which is why it is so amazing to cook like this. Because if you want to make risotto for a summertime or a springtime supper, you don't have to stand over the AGA feeling hot. We're going to put it into the simmering oven and run away. And with these modern AGAs, we're going to turn off the tops. So you don't have to have, you can adjust the amount of heat that you have in your kitchen. Right, that is looking fine. Let's pop the lid on. If you're doing normal rice, you're doing the opposite. So if you want nice steamed basmati or long grain rice, you put your rice in a pan with twice the amount of water. Don't stir it because you don't want it to go sticky. Don't stir it at all. Let the rice and the water come to the boil. As soon as it comes to the boil, put the lid on and put it into the simmering oven and leave it there for 20 minutes. And that will give you perfect fluffy rice. After 20 minutes, fork it over just to check it's absorbed all the water and it's nice and fluffy, and put it into the warming oven, and you can leave it there for half an hour until you're ready to serve, or just on the side, it'll stay nice and warm. Okay, so let's take out, here's my chicken by magic of cookery demonstrations. So we'll take the chicken out, we'll put the risotto into the simmering oven. I've got slight pan traffic jam. So let me just, I've got something else hidden in here. I just want to take out, we'll come back to that in a moment. A little reorganized, let's pop that in there if it will go. There we go. Good, so that's me finished just about with the tops just now. I can certainly turn that down to simmering temperature. And let's take a look at the chicken. I'll find my cloth and just tidy up my herbs. So we use the AGA e-cloths, the sort of really good microfiber ones for keeping the AGA as well as the kitchen clean. They basically take off most spills and things. And if you finish cooking, you can just wipe down the inside of the lid. That will keep things super clean really for as long as you need. So here's my chicken that I did earlier. So this had the same thing. It had half an hour. It put it in the roasting oven until it was looking nice and brown. And then I put it in the simmering oven to cook. Let it cool for a few minutes. The lemon, the half a lemon that I put in here has got these fabulous juices. So we're just going to squeeze those over the cooked chicken. And we don't need this quite yet because my risotto is not ready yet. So I'm going to put it into the warming oven to stay warm for half an hour. You can also use this side of this cooker is really good. The warming oven is brilliant for keeping food warm to ready to serve. The storage cupboard is great for resting joints of meat, keeping plates warm like we did for our breakfast plate, and for proving bread as well. So let's put this in. I think it's, oh, where's it going? Maybe it's going in, put it in this one. I've got a problem pan. You'll see what this is in a minute or two, actually. Wonder where else. I might put it in there for a minute. We'll put it on here. That will do it fine. I'll take these out. Oh, that's the tart. There we go. So chicken in today, warm risotto's cooking. My broccoli is cooked, actually. I'm just going to put that into a little serving dish. It's got this lovely crispy, you know, you could do, if you want nice crispy seaweed, those sorts of things, you can cook them either in a really hot oven, actually. You could just pop it onto a charred roll like this and it would be fine. There we go. So that's how my little broccoli looks. My charred roll pan out of the way. So I'll set a timer for my risotto. That will help keep me on the straight and narrow. There we go. Rice is always 20 minutes, regardless of how it cooks, by which time we'll have finished everything else, I think. Let's look at the tart. There we go. So it could probably do with a bit longer, actually. Pastry looks like it's cooking. It's got all its lovely layers. It's quite nicely browned on the bottom, which is lovely. So I don't want to give it too much longer. So here's the thing, okay? If your tart, depending on how thick your filling is, if the pastry's cooked on the bottom, you don't want to cook it anymore from the bottom, but actually you want to carry on cooking the top. And that often happens with bakewell tarts as well, where the filling, if it's a really deep bakewell, it might take longer to cook. So what to do is to take your AGA shelf, which is this one. This is your grid shelf, and it fits on the runners. Most of the cookware you tend to use fits directly on the runners, so you don't really use your shelves that much. But if I want to just place a bit of space between this and between the tart and the floor, then I can do. I'll just do what we do a lot, which is to put the grid shelf on the floor, and that creates about an inch of space. So it'll stop the pastry cooking too much on the bottom to let the filling carry on cooking above. Give that another few minutes. Great. So what should we do next? So that's quite a nice, easy main course. So the vegetables are really easy. You could do them in advance and let them just stay warm if you wanted to, or cook them last minute. The risotto is about 20 minutes start to finish. And your chicken is a lovely slow one that can be cooked as patiently as you needed. You can serve the chicken cold, actually, it's nice too. So let's do a bread. So as well as being great for pastry, your hot oven, your roasting oven is brilliant for bread. Today I've got a focaccia to show you, because I'm not sure how many of you guys make bread, and sometimes it's the sort of thing that can be slightly scary, but it's amazing to fill your home with the smell of freshly baked bread. It's really easy, and it's something that the AGA is so naturally good at. So let me just show you how we assemble the little focaccia that we've got today. So we'll do it step by step. I have done a few bits in advance for you, but I thought if I show you the steps, it might demystify it. Some of you will be brilliant bread makers already. You can just go to sleep for a minute or go and get another cup of tea. We want a half. So for this recipe, it's a nice size bread. It doesn't make absolutely matters, but it's easily doubled. Take a half-size AGA tray or a roasting tray of some sort that's got a bit of maybe this is inch high sides. I've lined it with a piece of bake lide. and I put a good slug of olive oil into the bottom. You want plenty here. So set that aside, then take a nice bowl. And then I've got some yeast. So this is, you want, for this recipe, it's just under 200 mils of water and a teaspoon and a half of yeast. And I've had it sat on the back of the AGA, just because yeast works faster when it's warm. It'll work well when it's cold, but it's just a nice way of warming it up. I've just used this Easy Bake yeast. You'll have something similar to this. It's got really small grains. If you get the one with the slightly bigger grains, they've got a coating and they need a bit longer to soak first. Or fresh yeast is fine as well. Maybe 30 grams of fresh yeast for this would be about equivalent. So water and yeast. Flour, 300 grams of strong white or bread flour, and then half a teaspoon of salt. That is why homemade bread doesn't always taste that great. It doesn't have enough salt in it. So don't forget the salt. Remember to put plenty in. Mix it together. I've used a spoon, but your best tools for this are actually your hands. And to be honest, bread doesn't really need a whole lot of kneading, but this is quite a conventional bread recipe. Mix it till it comes together, then just squash it together. Try and pick up all those bits of flour off the side. Right, now this is the bit where everyone gets bored. And there's two ways of doing it. You either put on the radio, set the alarm for 10 minutes and just quietly have a knead. And it will start off all sort of gloopy and sticky and lumpy and not that exciting. Resist the temptation to put lots of extra flour onto the worktop. What you want to do, if you need a bit of extra unstickiness, if you don't like the feeling of sticky dough on your hands, is to just put a bit of water on the worktop and you'll end up with a nice, really nice sticky dough. With bread, the wetter, the better. So once you've done 10 minutes worth of that, give our hands a little clean, you'll end up with a dough that looks a bit like this. And it'll be looking sort of exactly the same, but smooth. And it'll knead really nicely. And I just tend to knead by stretching, stretch and fold, and stretch and fold. So that's kind of how kneading works. But it will be kind of sticky. If you have a food processor, if you have a KitchenAid, use the dough hook. So to put all the ingredients and just mix it up, put the dough hook in and leave it on for 10 minutes. Watch it doesn't walk off the worktop. If you've got a Thermomix I use for all my dough, which is genius, actually just do it in that, give it 3 minutes to knead, or knead it by hand. Or you can use, even a handheld mixer has those spirally tools, and they're your dough hook. So you could stand and just let it mix and do the mixing for 10 minutes. So that's what to do with the dough. Once you've got your dough all delicious looking and smooth, you put it into your, oh, we could put this one in actually, come back here. Put it into your oiled tray, and don't be scared of lots of oil, that's a good thing. And just give it a little fold. You just want to coat it in the oil actually. Just roll it over and leave it like that. That's our dough. Cover that. I usually just cover it with another piece of bake glide or a piece of cling film, or one of those hair nets, one of those shower caps you get. Remember the days we used to be able to go to hotels. But if you've got any of those in the drawer, they're really good because the elastic goes around the dish. So then put it in a warm place. So that's either on the top of the simmering plate lid, covered with a tea towel to protect the stainless steel from scratching, or on this cooker, I've got the very handy storage cupboard. Remember we said it's good for warming plates, resting joints of meat, proving bread. It doesn't have its own heat source, but it borrows enough heat from the rest of the cooker when the other part of the rest of the cooker is on. And it will heat the storage cupboard to about 40 or 50 degrees, which is good for a pretty fast prove. You wouldn't want it any hotter than that, but that's fine. So once it's had half an hour or so to prove, most things that come out of the storage cupboard you can just about hold. So here's one we prepared earlier. So what we'll do, we'll just take that piece of bake glide and we'll put that one in there as well. Do that one later on when we're finished. Let's take my tart out because I think it will be done now. Perfect. So that's delicious, all nice and cooked. I'll show you in a minute what the bottom looks like, because it will be beautifully cooked and not overdone. So here's my risen focaccia dough. So what we're going to do with this is make holes in it, because you need the dimples in focaccia. They're important because that's where all the lovely oil goes, or flavor or things go. So with sort of oily hands, this is sitting in a puddle of olive oil. Didn't add any olive oil to the dough itself, which recipes often would do. Take your fingers and make holes, and we want to go all the way through. There we go. This is quite warm, this one today, actually. So you don't need, if you're proving in the storage cupboard, you don't need long. Pour in a bit of oil. We want some in the bottom of the holes. And then today I've got cherry tomatoes, so we're just going to put these into the holes. It's really important that the holes go all the way through, because when you bake it, they will try and close up. So these cherry tomatoes are lovely. Little sprigs of rosemary are nice. You could pop in little bits of garlic. Some of the thyme that we had for the chicken could go in here too. And it's lovely also if you softened a few onions. The onions we softened for the risotto, we did on the boiling setting in the end to do them quite quickly, but you could do them more slowly on the simmering plate. You could also do them on the floor of the roasting oven. So where we cook the pastry, that's your hidden hot plate. So you can put a pan on there without the floor grid, actually, with your onions in, and that will soften in the time sort of in the heats in between the simmering plate and the boiling plate. Your hidden hot plate is a really useful place. And if you've got the tops of your AGA switched off, but you just want to start off risotto, for example, you could use that part of your cooker to do the oniony bit and then put it into the simmering oven to carry on. So there's my focaccia all ready. So yes, a few softened onions, just slow cooked onions, or do them in the simmering oven, just put them in and leave them there for a couple of hours, and they'll do that lovely soften without browning thing. And then just spread those on the top before you bake it. Right, bread we bake in the roasting oven on the hottest, in the hottest setting. The intense heat from the cast iron gives it a beautiful oven spring, so it rises beautifully, and all the moisture, all the water in the bread dough then turns into steam and gives you that lovely oven spring. So you don't need to do any of this throwing in ice cubes or trays of water, all the stuff you see conventional ovens doing. Just pop it into the AGA. Make sure your bread dough is nice and wet to start with. Make sure it's a nice recipe, and off you go. So I'll move my chicken because it doesn't need to be in here right now. It's looking nicely browned. So that's perfect. We'll put that into the simmering oven in a bit once the space. And we'll bake the bread. So I'll give that 15 minutes. I don't think it'll need any longer than that. I put it on the second set of runners, sort of in the middle. The ovens are basically hot at the top and cooler at the bottom. So if you cook it the first time and think actually it's a little bit browner on the top than I wanted, cook it a bit lower down. Or similarly, if something cooks but it takes longer, you want to speed it up, just move it up a few rungs. Let's give it that one. There we go. Give it 15 minutes and we'll have a peek. So that's main course actually. Chicken, risotto's cooking, broccoli's cooked. Risotto is cooking nicely. Chicken is resting, it's perfect. We've got bread going in. So if I was having friends around supper at this point, in about half an hour or so, I've got supper ready to serve. I've got freshly baked bread coming out of the oven that will have cooled slightly. And all we need now is a pudding. So for pudding today, we've got two. I really struggle. I have an aunt and she is pudding queen, and she's the kind of person that when you have a party, she'll say, should I bring puddings or should I bring a pudding? And she'll turn up with about 4, which is great. And I think I'm a bit like her. I can never decide on one. So we've got steamed marmalade pudding and we've got some meringues with mascarpone cream. So let's just talk you through how we do these and where we cook them. Write down. So steamed marmalade puddings, actually, there's not really a lot here, is there? Because they're so easy. So you need a little pudding bowl, or individual ones are lovely as well. The recipe you've got will serve 4 or maybe 6 at a stretch. So if I was doing a little individual dishes, I would do 4 of those. So it's some butter, hardly any, 65 grams of butter, 65 grams of sugar, 1 egg, 75 grams of self-raising flour, and the zest of an orange. Mix it all up, take a pudding bowl, put a couple of a tablespoon or so of marmalade in the bottom of the bowl, put the pudding mixture on top, take a circle of greaseproof paper and put it on top of your bowl. And then you want a couple of layers of greaseproof paper and a piece of foil, put it over the top and tie it with a bit of string. You know, that is the most frustratingly annoying, tricky thing to do. With a big pudding basin, it's absolutely fine because you've got quite a good lip. But mine's a bit smaller today, and oh my goodness, it's driving me mad. So I put a rubber band, which might have melted, around the outside of the foil. But foil-wise, I've got that foil-backed greaseproof paper, which is great for this because you only need 1 layer. I think some people cover it with cling film as well, which works fine. You can use cling film in your simmering oven, which is where this cooks, and anything that goes in the microwave can go in the simmering oven. So that's quite a good test as well if you're thinking, could I put this in the simmering oven, would that warm it up? So steam the pudding in a pan. This is what's going on here, actually, because I had a slight pan traffic jam. Mainly because I've used my lovely cast iron buffet casserole for the risotto. Normally I use a 24 centimeter stainless steel buffet casserole, and it stacks more easily. So when the pudding has cooked, so this would bring it to the boil on the boiling plate and then move it to simmering plate and leave it to steam for 15 minutes in the pan. So I put the dish in here with water halfway up, then transfer it to the simmering oven and leave it to steam there for an hour or 90 minutes or so. And then when it's cooked, take it out. So it'll be, steam is hot, remember. So unless you've got AGA demonstrator asbestos hands, be careful with it. Good. So snip the string. I'm slightly crossing my fingers that this is going to be cooked enough because we've slightly moved it around. Oh, my rubber band's looking okay. It might live to fight another day, actually. Take off the foil. Pudding. So when I put the pudding in here, it came about halfway up, and now it's risen to the top. You know, it's just sponge cake, which is great because it makes it cheap. This is like bargain pudding of the year, but it's so delicious. You know, you could use lemons if you wanted to, any citrus fruit, something like that, just to flavour it a little bit would be delicious. Turn it out onto a dish. Take a nice, if in doubt, take a nice plate. There we go. And it might come out first time. If you butter the dish well enough, it'll come out. It might need a little bit of encouragement with a it might need a bit of encouragement with a spatula, or it might come out. Yeah, let's just give it a quick turn out with spatula. There we go. So the idea is we're going to have marmalade at the bottom. We've got orange flavour through the sponge, so you've got double orange flavour. And then we're going to make a little sauce to serve with it. I think maybe there's an opportunity to redesign the traditional pudding dish to give it a better, something you can grip. A better way, there we go, there's my pudding. A better way to get the string to hold on, and a better way to turn it out. There we go. So my marmalade, hopefully you can see that because it does look really yummy. I've got loads of marmalade on the top. If you're doing a lemon pudding, I would mix lemon zest into some golden syrup and put that on the bottom, and that will give us a lemon syrup that will turn out on the top of that. But that looks yum. Yes.
Oh, it's Simone. I just had a question from Elizabeth about, and I don't know if I missed it, but how long in the roasting oven with the pudding, and then how long in the simmering oven?
Yes, so the pudding I do, yeah, on the top for 15, so put the pudding into a pan, fill the pan half full with water, bring it to the boil and steam it on the top on the simmering plate for 15 minutes. Then take the whole pan, including all the water in it, and put it into the simmering oven for 90 minutes, the recipe says actually, but I think it probably cooks in about an hour. This one is slightly smaller. I halved the recipe, so you'll notice it says 1 large eggs and things like that. So it's really easily doubled, but this is a really nice size. Honestly, it's hardly any ingredients is the thing that produces this delicious, moist, lovely pudding. So the sauce that goes, so hopefully that's okay. The sauce that goes with it is super simple. It's just some heated creme fraiche, really. So with the orangey flavors again. So a spoonful of marmalade, some creme fraiche. I think it's 75 grams. There we go. And it's weird because we don't often heat up creme fraiche, actually. Some orange juice, a slosh, that technical expression, a slosh of orange liqueur. So this is Cointreau that I've got today, which makes it feel like, definitely makes it feel like winter. Although at the moment it's basically going into margaritas, actually. That's its best thing in life. Give it a stir and just heat it, but only very gently. We'll put it on the simmering plate to heat for a moment or two. And that will give us a nice sauce. I've turned my hot plate down from boiling setting down to simmering setting. Okay, so if it was on boiling setting, my pan was bubbling over, I wanted to cool it down, pull it off onto the resting area, or pull it off the heat partly. If your pan's got a nice flat conductive base, it will spread that heat across the bottom. And then if I turn down the top plate on this cooker, it'll cool it back down to simmering plate in a few minutes. And once it's cooled down, I can then put it back on the full plate for simmering. Or if you're making a delicate sauce and you want really gentle heat from simmering setting, you can just pull it off the heat slightly to reduce it. So that's how we control the heat on the top of an AGA. So leave that on simmering for a few moments. When your tops are switched off on these cookers and your ovens are on, your tops still stay slightly warm, so they would behave like a traditional AGA warming plate. So if you take a dish out of the oven and you just want to put it down somewhere, then lift the lids and use them when they're switched off as your work surface, slightly your warming plate or your car park for things. That's a space not to be underestimated. Good. So my pinger's gone. What do we think the pinger might be for? Let's have a look. It might be for, I don't think it's for bread. I'm going to turn my focaccia around. It might be for bread, actually. It's always a good idea to have a peek, turn things around, make sure they're cooking nice and evenly, look out for any hot spots. You'll always get a bit of variation from the back to the front, just because the door is at the front. So put things a little bit further back in the oven to help them cook evenly as well. You shouldn't get too much variation side to side on your AGA cooking. So that's so the bread's in there. In the simmering oven, we've got risotto. In the warming oven, I've got breakfast still, and I've got my chicken. And in my storage cupboard, I've got my alternative sauce for my, if making a homemade sauce or you just don't fancy cream, if you just want something really simple, this carton of custard is really warm. It's only just, I can only really just hold it. If you were here in person, I would pass it around. But I haven't opened the carton at all. That's completely sealed still. And I could just pour that. That's warm enough to serve. So you could serve the steamed pudding with some delicious custard as well. You can also use the simmering oven, which is where that had heated actually, for pouches of rice, pouches of lentils, grains, all those things that are nice just to warm through slightly. So for my second pudding, my final pudding today, I've got some meringues. I've got some mini meringue pavlovas, and meringues are so simple to cook in your AGA. So baking wise for the AGA, we use the roasting oven for scones, profiteroles, choux pastry, bread, pizzas, pastry like we cooked on the floor. The moderate setting, the baking oven, we use for biscuits, cakes, things with more sugar actually, starting off shortbread. We use a simmering oven for baking for fruit cakes. A 10-inch fruit cake will cook in about 4 hours, keep it really nice and moist. We also use the simmering oven for starting off meringues or cooking them maybe quickly for an hour. And we use the warming oven for meringues as well, which is where I've cooked. That's my sauce. So we'll just take the sauce, we'll leave it on that resting area, which is such a handy spot to have things. So my meringues, these ones, which we had to move to make space for the chicken, but these have been in the warming oven. So I put them in, started off in the simmering oven, I gave them half an hour. And then I moved them into the warming oven and I left them there for the rest of the day yesterday. So you can make meringues in advance, you can make them as you need them. And actually, I had 2 spare egg whites, which I'll tell you about in a second. So I had 2 egg whites, twice the weight of sugar, which is somewhere between 130 and 150 grams of sugar, depending on how big your egg whites are. Whisk up the egg whites in a very clean bowl till they're fluffy, add the sugar teaspoon by teaspoon. That's what stops the weeping. If you get weeping meringues, it's because you've added the sugar too quickly. And then just I blob spoonfuls of meringue onto a piece of baking lid on my cold plane shelf. Now, the cold plane shelf is a really superly useful thing, and I know loads of you will know exactly what to do with this. You can use it as a shelf, and it's handy to have several baking biscuits. You can cook right to the edges with them as well. Great for trays of scones and things like that. We also use it as a heat shield. So if I have a nice lasagna cooking in the roasting oven and it's nice and brown on the top, but it's still cold in the middle, I would slide in the cold plane shelf. It acts as a heat shield, so it carries on cooking in the middle, but it doesn't brown anymore on the top. And the final way we use it is if I want to bake a cake on moderate setting, on baking setting, but my oven is on roasting setting, it normally takes 2 hours to cool down from roasting to baking, but we don't normally have 2 hours to wait to bake things. So slide in the cold plane shelf, it makes it hotter above and cooler below. So that gives you a mini baking oven instantly. So that's what that's for, but we also use it for cooking our meringues on as well, like I have done today. So now my meringues, I'm going to fill. So I said to Marissa, tell me what's happening in seasons with you. What have you got that's delicious at the moment? And she said lemon. So I thought, okay, I know what we need to cook today. So we're going to do lemon curd with our meringues today, because that's something super simple that you can have in the fridge. And there's nothing nicer than freshly made lemon curd. And there's a really good AGA way of doing it that I'll talk about briefly. It's in the beautiful little green Richard Magg's AGA book, and it's on the AGA website if you Google it. But what you basically do is you take a kiln jar like this, and you put into it some butter and some sugar and some lemon juice, and you put that. So first of all you take off the rubber seal, and you put your lemon juice and your butter and your sugar in there, and you put that into the simmering oven, and you leave it there for half an hour or so, and you give it a stir. And then what should happen is the sugar melts, and if it needs a bit longer, give it a little bit longer and stir it till the sugar's melted. Then you take a couple of eggs and you crack those in, and you use one of these. This is a one gadget wonder. I use it for one thing in my kitchen. It's this. You take you crack in. I put in normally an egg and then 2 egg yolks, and you give it a whisk, and you whisk like this for about a minute, and then you put it back into the simmering oven. You can shut the lid like that, but obviously you haven't got the seal. Don't shut it, just leave it slightly open like that. Put it back in the simmering oven, leave it for another half an hour and have a look. And once it's thickened, you know you've got lemon curd. And then once it's done, I'll move this out of the way. Once it's done, it will look like this. All just smooth and lovely. Let me just spoon this to let you see. I put the zest of one of the lemons in actually to start with. Beautiful and homemade and lovely, and that's an amazing present as anything else. Then take the seal, once it's cooled down, put the seal on, then you can just shut it and store it in the fridge. Easily a week, but never lasts that long actually, because somebody wanders past with a spoon to eat it. So to make these look beautiful, we've got a little plate. If in doubt in life, put things on a nice plate. Take a meringue, we'll do 2. You know that they're cooked because they'll peel off the paper. There was a slight bit of resistance, but you've got that lovely bottom to them. If you've only got a simmering oven, if you don't have a warming oven, give the meringues an hour and they'll be done. And in the simmering oven, you might well get that beautiful slight colouring, which is a very AGA meringue colour. And I have friends who always do oh, you've got an AGA, haven't you? You're so lucky. I can't believe it. You've made those beautiful meringues again. So there is a bit of AGA meringue thing going on. So take a couple of these then. The rest will store in a an airtight container for weeks, if not months. You know, I have I've got a couple of houses which are holiday lets that we let, and they have AGAs in them actually. And I cleared out the pantry in one of them recently, and I found some meringues. I think I made them like 5 years ago with Szechuan peppercorns on them. And I wanted to serve them with strawberries because that's a lovely taste combo. And they were still amazing. They were still crispy. I couldn't believe it. So take something dairy-ish. For this, I'm liking mascarpone at the moment. That's my current favorite. Again, it's got a slightly longer shelf life than cream. It's as rich as double cream. It's that similar richness. And we just want a couple of blobs. It's not quite as lactic as creme fraiche somehow. There we go. A couple of blobs. But these are nice because you don't have to faff about with the whipping cream at the last minute. You know, how many times have I got into my party dress and realized I've got to whip the cream, and you're standing like this with the whisk, trying not to get splattered. So something like a spoonable cream like this, you can assemble these at the last minute once you've done your finishing and getting ready. Some of my lemon curd, oh, delicious. Just a few blobs on the top. This would go into, you know, I love to put this into Victoria sponge cake actually with raspberry jam on the other side as well. Now, 2 ways of finishing this. One is my toast, remember the toasted almonds? So these, and again, the toasting is what gives the flavor. This whole lemon and almond thing together is quite Italian. They often do almond and lemon and vanilla together. And you know, they put vanilla essence into their baking powder in Italy. Who knew? I mean, you probably guys know this already, maybe actually, I don't know. So that's quite pretty. Finish it off with a dusting as ever of icing sugar. But the other thing I thought about, I was trying to work out what was seasonal for you, but less so for us, was some, I don't know where they are now, some pomegranate seeds. Here we go. Now, for you, they're fresh, and for us, mine were in my freezer, so they're not quite as beautiful, but they're not bad. But they are quite a pretty way to finish this because you can get a bit of colour. Or some of those freeze-dried raspberries, they're good. Or a raspberry, and again, we can have a bit of icing sugar. Why not? So there we go. So that is pudding, steamed pudding or meringues, whichever you prefer. Tart that we baked, breakfast that we looked at to start with. Oh, focaccia. Oh, no, I've probably overdone it. This is what happens. When you set a ping and you look at, always set 2 timers, like we did for the tart to start with. We were okay, weren't we? Oh, well, probably okay. That's my meringues. There's my focaccia, nicely browned. I think underbake your focaccia if you can, because part of its charm is that it's so nice and fluffy. This is on a piece of bako lide, so we're just going to fish the bako lide out. Oh no, it's still quite soft. That's nice. Put my tray away. And once this is, what's nice to do with focaccia is, oh, pop it on a board. Just with some more tomatoes and things. And these nice sort of sharing boards are lovely. A few pieces of focaccia, maybe something like some griddled halloumi would be nice, a few little bits of chicken. Let me cut that up. Actually, that can stay on there for just now. We'll put it on here. Come back to that in a moment. That looks fine. And again, this freezes really well. So I often make double the recipe and I make 2, or I make a full-size tray's worth. And I freeze it, I cut it into 4 and freeze it, because that then produces actually it's very Moorish. So if you put the whole loaf down, everybody will eat it. If you put half of it, they'll eat it as well, but you've still got half in the freezer. So wrap it in something, a piece of greaseproof paper or foil, pop it in the freezer, or cut it into 4, which is nice. And it's lovely in little squares, just with drinks before supper, or it's lovely in little longer pieces on the side of a bowl with some soup. So that is focaccia, looking nice. Good. So finally, all I think I need to do is to finish off my risotto actually, and then present the chicken. What I'm going to do with the chicken, I'm going to take it. The thing about spatchcocked chicken looks beautiful, but then sometimes it's a bit like, oh, now what do I do with it? How do I serve it? So I'm going to carve it and shred the meat on the legs and the thighs and serve that on top of the risotto. So I'll get the risotto out and we'll show you the finishing of that. And then actually while I do the chicken, Simone, if you guys have questions, if you want to tell me anything about your AGA world, we can chat and discuss things actually and help with any other queries about AGAs while I do the chicken, and you can watch and listen at the same time. So let's get, there's the sauce. A little bit, you just need the marmalade to melt for that bit. Let's get the risotto out. And we'll finish this under the worktop so you can see it. So there you are. So I told you it would look really unpromising. And what happens with the radiant heat you see with the AGA is that things don't move when you're cooking them in the oven. So all the magic happens without any stirring. So it's, if you did like a, 3 onions to do as make a little onion marmalade, if you put the onions in the bottom of the oven, in the simmering oven, and left them there for half a day, when you came back, they would almost look like nothing had happened. But as soon as you stir them, they'll melt down into that beautiful, delicious cookedness. So put the rest of the stock in and give it a stir. And you can add a little bit. You might even need a little bit more, actually. This is coloured quite nicely because I had some colour on the onions. But if you cook the onions on the simmering plate, you'll get them softened without browning. Let's add a little bit more. This is a really useful dish actually for family eating, because you can serve it to smaller people early, simply with maybe just peas. And then you can add some more grown-up ingredients later, maybe some char-grilled salmon on the top, or some of the roasted squash. So stir in some butter. I'm going to give it a bit of a stir. Parmesan cheese, 2/3 of the Parmesan probably. Yum. Again, such simple ingredients, but quite a lot of flavour from the onions. And then the risotto. Now stock, when I come to serve the chicken, what I'm going to do is to take my chicken bones and put them in a pan to make stock. If you're making stock with your AGA, bring your, take a pan and take your chicken bones or your vegetables. If you're making a vegetable stock, just roast some vegetables first and use those. And then maybe the end of an onion and a carrot and a black peppercorn or two and a parsley stalk or things like that if you have them. Put the bones in if you want to, then cover it with cold water and bring it to the boil on the boiling plate or the simmering plate. And then as soon as it comes to the boil, put a lid on the pan and put it into your simmering oven, and that will become lovely stock. You can leave it there overnight, to be honest, depending on how coloured you want it. An hour is fine, 2 hours is fine for a light stock. Overnight is fine too. So if you can remember when you finish carving a joint, take all the meat off, put the bones into a pan, throw away any gristly bits and the wingtips, and make your stock. And then you can store the stock in it. I use those milk cartons and freeze them in those in the freezer, and I've got stock ready for when I want it. But today I just used a teaspoon or 2 of stock powder. So there's my risotto. Now we're going to carve the chicken, so I don't need this quite yet. So here's a very useful feature of the induction hob. So remember we said you can bridge the 2 zones together for a bigger pan, which is what we'll do. But then we can use the low temperature function. So I'm going to use the medium one, 70 degrees, to just keep it warm. So that will act. Then it's acting like a traditional AGA warming plate, as well as acting like a hot induction hob if I wanted to. So we'll put the lid on, pop it on there. I'll get the chicken out and we can chat. So bridge the zones together, press the 2 together, you get 2 little horseshoes. Then we want low temperature function, we want the second wavy line, and that will just keep that perfectly nice and warm. My sauce is finished for my, still got a blob of marmalade that's a bit reluctant to break up, but there's my sauce. You can add a bit of sugar if you want to this, but it doesn't normally need it because your pudding's quite sweet. So this was a sauce for the marmalade pudding. There we go. Good. That's my marmalade pudding to go with it. Right, let me get my chicken. So remember the chicken's in the warming oven. No, where did we put it in the end? We either put it in the That's my extra bread that's in there. So my plates are in my storage cupboard. My chicken is keeping warm in my warming oven. There we go. Yum. It smells really lemony and delicious and thymy. Let me also show you, right at the start, remember our lazy teenagers whose breakfast we put in. So my egg, it's been in slightly longer than normal, but after half an hour or so, you've still got a beautiful runny egg on your breakfast. Great, so that's the end. So I'm going to just portion up the chicken now, but that's the end of the cooking hour really today. Let me give you a quick recap of what we've done, so that anybody who is happy and wants to leave then can, but do please say we can do question and answer because it's great. I'd love to hear what colour your Agas are actually as well. So we've done a quick Aga breakfast, we've done a winter vegetable tart, we've done our slow roast spatchcocked chicken with a creamy Parmesan risotto and our charred broccoli. We've done focaccia with cherry tomatoes. We've done a steamed marmalade pudding with a creme fraiche sauce. And then finally, mini meringue pavlovas with mascarpone cream, lemon curd, toasted almonds. So hopefully that is some nice recipes to try. And do please, you know, find me on social media and tell me what you cooked. You know, send me pictures of things that you've made. I'd love to see what you make. I'm going to fiddle with the chicken and see if Simone or Marissa have any questions or any comments, actually. Anything you'd like to share?
Naomi, there's been a request. Can you please cut the focaccia so we can see the bubbles and the structure of it?
Oh, yes, yes. It was a bit hot when it first came out. It's a bit crispier than normal, actually. I think it was probably in the warming oven. It probably was slightly hotter in the warming oven than it would normally have done to just prove enough. But it's not bad. Let me just show you that one. So there is. So we've got a nice texture on our bread. Oops. There we go.
Yeah.
Losing my cherry tomatoes. We've got tomatoes in the chicken. That's a nice combo, isn't it? So that will cut into nice little squares too in a minute if we want to. The secret with bread is a good recipe with a good amount of water in it. And then a good knead, but kneading is just about developing the gluten. And the thing about developing the gluten is that time does just as good job at that as kneading. So you can mix your bread up and give it a couple of stretches every time you wander past every half an hour for a couple of hours, and you'll have beautifully stretched dough. In the same way as if you do it fast for 10 minutes, a bit like the risotto thing, you know, as long as you do enough stretching over time and let that gluten relax enough and then shape, you'll get a nice bread. But this is a nice quick one today, just to give you a taste.
Now, does anyone have any questions for Naomi? Anyone?
I have.
Great.
I was just wondering, with your cooker, if you would to leave part of it on, which part would you leave on? Would you leave one of the ovens on maybe, or would you just turn it off when you're finished with it?
Yeah, great question. And this is the essence of what this particular cooker is actually. So let me talk you through a week and a year, I suppose, is the thing, because you can flex it to your day of the week, to your time of the year, and to your time of life a bit as well, actually. So at the moment, it's summer in the UK here. So I have my warming side, the green button side, on 24/7, because it gives that little bit of heat. It gives me somewhere to dry a pair of trainers if I want to, or tins out of the dishwasher. It gives me somewhere to put supper to keep it warm. It gives me somewhere to rest a joint of meat. It gives me somewhere to keep the plates warm. So I get the warming oven and I get the storage cupboard slightly warm as well. And then for cooking at the moment, so I come down in the morning and I turn on the simmering oven, because I like to have that on, because it does all sorts of kind of cooking during the day. So I have the simmering oven on all day. And that also gives a little bit of heat in the kitchen if we need it, but we don't particularly need it at the moment. Then I turn on the top oven, the hot oven on this cooker. I either turn it on manually if I think I want to cook. So maybe I might turn it on at lunchtime if I want to cook in the afternoon, And then I turn it off when I'm finished, or I turn it off when I go to bed. And I have a timer that's fitted to that one as well, that you can order with the ER3 when you order it, or with the 60, and that will turn on the hot oven for me. So if I'm cooking away somewhere further away, but I know I want the oven on at 4 o'clock, ready to cook fish fingers and chips for supper, or whatever we're having, or jacket potatoes, I can set it to turn itself on. So I would tell the cooker to turn on at 4 o'clock. It would be hot by 5, allow the hour to heat up. And then it will turn itself off in the evening. So that's what's happening in summer. And I'm just using the tops, and I'm using the induction a lot, actually, to heat up one pan, start off risotto to cook it in the simmering oven, or just cook the tops. If you think, actually, I don't really want to turn the oven on to cook today, I don't need the simmering oven, I'll just do a little stir fry on the tops, and that can be supper or whatever we need. So, so you've got that flexibility. And then when we get into the autumn, actually, if it gets mega hot, I won't turn the simmering oven on at all, and we'll just use the fan oven for cooking. So that's my sort of summer oven. If I don't want anything else in the kitchen and we just want to do pizza, or I want to do baking, turn it on when we need it and turn it off again. Then when we get to the autumn, when the clocks go back, I'll start leaving the simmering oven on all day and all night, so that when I come down in the morning, actually the kitchen's slightly cozy. And if you leave the kitchen door open, get some of the heat comes through as well. And then I am more likely to have, so my hot oven's on a timer then. So it comes on at 7 in the morning, ready to cook in the morning if I want to. It's split into 3 sections during the day. It does 7 till 12, 12 till 4, and 4 till 9. And what that means is with the timer, actually, you can advance it. So if I come down in the morning, realize I'm not going to cook it all morning at all, I can just advance the timer. It turns it off, and then it comes on with the next on the setting, which is 12 o'clock. On for the rest of the day. So I can override it really easily. But the biggest benefit of that is that in those in between autumn and winter times, I've got the simmering oven on 24/7, as well as the warming oven on 24/7, to keep the kitchen nice and cozy and give me somewhere to cook things if I want to. Those two probably cost £2.50 a week each to keep on. So really nothing compared to a traditional AGA. And then I turn, once in the winter months, I might have the top oven on a lot more because I'm doing more cooking like that. When we get to peak holidays, winter holiday season, I would have the whole cooker on all day, and all I would do is turn off the hot oven at night, because then we can do whatever cooking we want as and when we want to. And then coming out the other side for us, when we get into spring, I would then, around Easter time for us actually, so autumny time for you, I would then be go back into just have the simmering oven on during the day, turn it off at night. But if all you do is turn the tops on to cook with them and turn them off when you're finished, and with the ovens, turn your hot oven off at night, and in the warmer months of the year, turn your simmering oven off at night. And that, I find, gives a nice balance of always having somewhere to cook things, and also having a nice temperature in the kitchen. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
It's a really flexible, it's by far the most flexible. For people that want a bit of modern technology to go with their AGA, it's a really tremendous AGA, because you've got all the benefit of all the cast iron cooking and all the ease of cooking and the ease of the roasting oven just being there ready to roast a chicken and do jacket potatoes. But similarly, you can control it a bit, so it makes it much cheaper to run. We used to have a 4-oven oil, which was lovely and cooked, exactly the same way, but was a lot more expensive to run, and then had lots of heat in the summer that I didn't need. So I like the fact I never have to worry about do I turn it off in hot weather? I just turn off some bits of it and keep the bits I want for cooking. If it's really hot. So yesterday, for example, it was quite warm here actually, and the AGA was off completely. So I thought I wanted to do some cooking last night. So I just turned it on at 5 o'clock, and it was hot, ready to cook at 6. And then we turned it off when we were finished. So you can use it as just an oven to cook with, but you can use it also as an oven for living.
Another question, actually, Nay, was about your solar panel, and I think you mentioned earlier that you have one solar panel to fire up your whole AGA. what you said?
Yes, so I'm not a heating engineer expert, but my lovely man who did our solar panels, he said one of these, I think we've got 4, and we feed the extra that we don't use into the grid here, I think. But he said one, and I said, Martin, how many? I said, gosh, wouldn't it be amazing if you could just run your AGA completely off your solar panels? How many would you need? And he said, but one of yours is already doing enough to run your AGA in terms of the output from the panel. He knew his electrical power requirement and the output from the panel. So, which is genius when you think about it, isn't it?
Yeah. And I suppose too, I forget that I don't think of England as being the sunniest place either. So it's good to know that you can do that there as well.
So yeah, see, I grew up in Scotland where everybody has I grew up on a farm in Scotland, so everybody, AGAs were just part of life, weren't they? And I gradually worked my way down the country, mainly involving my husband. And we move house far more times than is good for anyone. But lately we're in Suffolk and it's properly hot here and it's properly dry. And my garden is full of like desert plants because we don't really want to have to pay to water anything. And when we moved in last August and it was 35 degrees and it stayed 35 degrees for about a month, it was really incredible. So we do get, so in the south of England now, what's happening is a lot more people who were only the really traditional homes had AGAs because you needed all the lovely background heat and you couldn't really control it. But now, because you can just switch off the ovens or only have the hot oven on for cooking in the summer, and you can control all that heat, it's much easier for people in the hot parts of this country to have an AGA. It was always the thing was, oh, are we turning the AGA off yet for the summer? And then you have to have another cooker. And actually that's just, the only reason I've got the fan oven on this cooker is mainly because I wanted to be able to use it for demonstrations. Actually, we knew we would be cooking at home when we moved in here. And we chose the ER3 because it fits, this kitchen was already fitting, it's got standard depth units, which are 600 deep. So we had to have a 3 series cooker and we put the fan oven in. But to be honest, you don't, because the AGA heats up so quickly, it's not something that you rarely need it as an emergency oven. It's mainly for extra capacity. If the oven's on roasting, but I want to bake 4 cakes or the children want to bake biscuits or something, it's mainly I mainly use it as an alternative heat source. But I think for somebody who was anybody running any kind of little business at home that involved food or cooking, a bed and breakfast or anything like that, or actually my husband's a bit AGA allergic. Well, he's not really actually, he just likes to be cooked for and looked after, but he's happy to leave me to do the AGA bit, which maybe is fair enough. But he is really happy to cook with the fan oven, with the induction hob and the fan oven. And he never has to worry about whether he's put it in the wrong bit or whether he wasn't listening when I explained what the roasting oven was for and that sort of thing. So it makes it a very accessible cooker for any sort of family. Or if Granny comes to stay, she can use the oven. I haven't got to worry about giving her an AGA lesson, which her memory wouldn't cope with now anyway. There's my chicken, all done. So I've got a pan full of bones. I'm going to fill that with cold water and turn that into stock. I've got a dish full of beautiful chicken. I've tossed I've just kind of shredded it and cut out the breast meat into little pieces. And I've tossed it in the lovely juices and things and the lemon and the thyme that were in the bottom. And that's why I didn't put in too much olive oil, because I knew I would have plenty of nice juices coming from my chicken and I wouldn't be needing to do too much. I wouldn't be wanting too much extra oil with that. Right, let's finish. So the risotto's been on my very clever keeping warm function. The thing with these AGAs, actually, it takes, it'll take you a full sort of calendar year really to get to know the features, I think, for different weather and different climates. And different times of life is interesting. If you've got tiny babies and the number of times I sat with my babies beside the AGA, feeding them in the middle of the night because it was a nice cozy place. But then life moves on and they go to school and you're suddenly out a lot more. So you can use the timer just for the top oven, or you have the ovens on when you want them when you're at home, but you don't have to be heating the whole house and the whole AGA when you're not there to use it. And then actually life moves on. So if you then move house, because these are so easy to install and they come in one piece, you then just take the Aga with you. You literally, the removal men, the electrician disconnects it, the removal men put it on a pallet, wrap it up all nice and take it off onto the lorry, and then it goes into the next house and it goes in where the standard range cooker was, and off you go again. So all of the modern Agas are really easy to use like that too. So they are very much an Aga for, you know, flexibility during your week, flexibility during your year, and flexibility during your lifetime, really, actually. Good. So all I'm going to do with my chicken is put it on top. Oh, I've got broccoli, actually. We could put that on the side too. Let's have broccoli. This has got such a delicious flavour to it. Let's go broccoli one side. Risotto on the bottom. If you make risotto in advance, you can revive it. Just chill it really nicely, and then add a bit more stock and give it another stir, and it will come back to life. And that's what the restaurants do. That's how they manage to keep risotto on a menu. There we go. So you've got the recipes for all of these dishes, but please let me know if you cook them. Let me know if you make them. Tell me how you get on. I hope they're delicious. Don't forget the salt. That will make everything tasty.
We'll be sending out the recipes tomorrow.
Great. And I'll take some pictures as well. So I'll send you the pictures over. So if you want to pop those on, have a look at them and send them out, that'd be great.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so hopefully, has that been useful, enjoyable? Have you learned things?
Absolutely. What I have got one more question for you, and I'm not sure whether this is one for you or not, but there was somebody who asked about solar power with an older Aga, the older style heat storage, I think that they were talking about. And I don't know if you know anything about that.
So if it's, so I asked somebody at AGA about solar the other day, and I said, why don't we do a completely solar AGA? And they said, well, we don't really need to. Any AGA can be a solar AGA. You just need to have, that's just how your electricity gets supplied. So if you have an electric AGA, you can choose whether you get your electricity from the mains or whether you generate it yourself from your own solar panels. So yes, if you've got a traditional AGA that runs an electric one, and you've got solar panels, you'll already be supplying some of your electricity. But if you put in solar panels, then that will, you will then be supplying your electricity to your whole home, including your AGA. Actually, you wouldn't wire it, I don't think, so that you'd have one panel that only literally goes into the AGA, and that's all it does. But any form of solar, and it's quite nice, you know, if you invest in your panels up front, you're paying for your electricity really for the years, rather than being subject to the fluctuations of the electricity price going forward.
Thank you.
Well, it looks delicious. Wish we could taste it.
I know. I can't even send you it either, actually. So we're really lucky actually cooking, because we tend to try and cook dishes that are enjoyable as well and quite current. You know, I like with this, I like the flavour on the broccoli. I like that it's moist in the middle and it's charred on the outside. That's a real cast iron cooking thing. And the chicken's got all that lovely flavour. And I love that the brown meat on the chicken shreds away from the bone so easily. If you fast roast chicken or roast it in a conventional oven, that brown meat just kind of gets stuck, whereas everything just melts away. So and that will be lovely. You know, the chicken, I could toss some mayonnaise through that and serve it cold. That would be really nice as well. And I could, now that it's cooked, I could freeze it. The only thing I wouldn't really freeze today out of everything, I wouldn't freeze the risotto. I would just maybe chill that and revive it. The broccoli I wouldn't freeze, but the chicken would freeze, the steamed pudding would freeze, the tart will freeze, fully cooked, and just defrost in its dish, warm it up in the simmering oven a bit. That's lovely. But yeah.
Thank you very much. It's been great. Yeah.
Thanks for arranging it, Simone.
Yeah, no, that's lovely.
Or AGA Australia, whoever.
Well, I think we're very fortunate to have had Nay cook for us, and hopefully later in the year we might see if she can join us again, maybe on a different kind of AGA.
Yeah, and it's
that'd be
actually
great. Well,
I don't know whether you've done many of the Zooms before, but I think it's actually worked really well.
Great. Yeah. Do you feel like you can see well?
Yeah, can't smell it or taste it.
I know.
And I always pick up
Oh,
something like, yeah, the bread thing was great. That was just very good. I mean, I think a few years ago, whenever it was, and I was introduced to the egg on that my life, that just revolutionized.
Yeah.
Do lots of things on that Bakelite paper. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Halloumi we do a lot. Have you done that? Just griddling little slices of halloumi and then serve them with a little bit of chili, either with some nice tomatoes as a little salad and some leaves, or just as a kind of stand-up nibble in the kitchen, a stand-up starter. If we've got people over for supper, you might have some little pieces of halloumi and then some fresh pesto or some chili jam is nice. You can do scallops on your simmering plate. You can do popcorn. You can do flatbreads on the boiling plate. We could do curry night. It's lovely to do with an AGA. We do slow roasted curry, perfect rice, roasted spiced cauliflower and things, for example. And then we do naan breads and flatbreads and poppadoms on the boiling plate on the top. So that's a really fun one to do. But yeah, but it's a total treat to meet you all online, and it's lovely to see you. Actually, the cameras are really nice. So I hope you've enjoyed the cooking. And yeah, Simone, thank you very much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you all. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you, Naomi. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Lockdown free over here now. Thank you. Oh no, sorry. So no, we escaped. We left Queenscliff and came up to Hotham. So it's -1 here. It's freezing.
Oh dear.
It was like have to make the dishes up here. So
Enjoy.
Freezing. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.